This is the Footbrawl Podcast with your hosts, Tyler, Andy, and Boyer.
Welcome back to the Mantasy Footbrawl Podcast presented by the Performance Enhancing Dads. What's happening, fellas?
Happy football!
Football. Let's go.
We ain't got no problem no more. We can play football.
Football. All right. So we're hitting MFL. For any new people that are joining us that aren't league members, this is an auction draft. We get a $200 budget plus or minus $30. We trade up to a couple years out draft dollars. It's two keepers. You can go plus or minus one on that as well. And you can keep your keepers for 1 year and then they get put back in to the draft. So we love the auction league. Gives you the ability to grab the people you want and then tell your league mates that they fucking suck because they grabbed somebody that you wanted. Outbid them if you want them. That's how it works.
Honestly, I love the setup, even with this, just the two keepers. It doesn't feel too big. It's perfect. Like it's been working really well for us. I feel like we haven't had to tweak that almost at all, which is, I feel like, really impressive for Jeremy to have created such a league out of just the start like that.
Yeah, it's nice to not have to mess with inflation or any of that nonsense. We don't have to figure anything out. And I also don't have to be mad that I didn't get Justin Jefferson in his very first year and then I'm SOL for 4 years or anything dumb like that.
That would be the worst.
I'm also just impressed Jeremy can do anything that well. So let alone set up a fantasy football.
He was probably drunk when he came up with that. When he does his good thinking.
Broken clock is still right. What, twice at least a day?
That's what the saying would go. So
yeah. So he's
we're going to jump into some of the offseason trades here before we hit keeper values, how we're looking at teams going into the draft. And Andy's got some fun what matters in drafting, whether it's quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, certain players, how much you spend in spots. Listen to Andy later on his rant, so make sure you stick around. We will hit
this one.
We'll hit the first offseason trade.
Oh wow, just classic.
And Deshaun Watson.
Start that trade over, Ty. You froze on us. Must be cold up in Chicago.
Paul acquires Isaiah Pacheco, Deshaun Watson from Charlie for 8 draft dollars in 2023, and Brian Robinson. Deshaun Watson is a $1 keeper. Isaiah Pacheco is a $2 keeper. And then for Charlie getting Brian Robinson.
I don't think Charlie kept him.
Which he didn't keep anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think it was 9, if I remember right.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So for $8 getting Pacheco and Watson as keepers is a solid situation. I think $8 is fair though. We kind of say split the difference. It really depends upon how you value Pacheco this year. Watson would probably have gone for somewhere in that probably $7 to $10 range. A lot of our high-end quarterbacks go 15, 20 at the absolute max, maybe, but a lot of our quarterbacks only go for that $15 to $17 range at the most. So the Mahomes, the Allens, those type of guys. So Watson would fall down into that one of the next couple tiers down in that probably $7 to $10 range off the top of my head. So he got a decent little value there out of Watson, and then Pacheco probably goes for somewhere in the teens, early 20s would be my guess. So the value is definitely there.
Yeah, I think the value is favors Paul, but Charlie had so many options to be able to get $8 out of a couple of them. We don't normally see, I feel like, that many keeper trades, so I don't blame him for getting a twofer and getting just some cash out of it, because he had a ton of good options. He was pretty much the one team that had a ton. Except for you, Ty, but you only had a keeper, so we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, so I want to see what you guys think. So Deshaun Watson, I've got somewhere around QB 8, 9 on my board, somewhere around there. Definitely outside of the top. You've got Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts, and then your top tier, and then you've got your Burrow, Fields, Justin Herbert, probably Trevor Lawrence seems to be creeping up into that next tier. So that's 7 guys. Even if you put Watson as next, he's probably still not in that group. So top of the 3rd tier, 8th best quarterback. I'm not saying the value is not there for $1, but do you want to be locking yourself in to the 8th best quarterback going into the draft? And if your plan is to lock yourself into the 8th best quarterback and then still go after a guy higher than that, then why are you pissing around with keeping a quarterback instead of somebody else that you could have paid? I mean, he could have gone and paid $5 to get Miles Sanders or, somebody else that's going to help your team. So
I mean,
I don't have any issues with the value. The value is great. And, we'll talk about that a little bit, but it feels weird to me to have a bottom half quarterback and lock it in.
I think is that the one thing with Deshaun Watson is he's shown he can be a top 3 or 4 guy. Like he's a little bit different than the other guys in that bottom 4 of the top 12, right? Because he's done it before and we don't really know if he can do it. I don't believe he can necessarily do it in Cleveland, but he's done it before. So I'm not upset about locking yourself in on a high upside guy and then just locking in the quarterback spot. If he drafts another quarterback, then we'll have some questions, but I don't think it's that bad because Watson has done it before. But I think that's the only thought, is just the ceiling is there for him.
Right. Well, and I floated out Mahomes to a handful of people, and I was like, hey, anybody want Mahomes? I mean, he was $15 keeper, but so I mean, he's at the top end.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to lock in a guy, a couple bucks could have probably got him for you because I would have taken a couple extra.
If you're trying to split whatever difference, you're probably talking $1 or $2 based on where quarterback.
I mean, Joe Burrow is $2, and Robbie didn't keep him, so I assume you could have had him for a couple bucks. Granted, this was the first trade that happened. It was way back in June. Like, I mean, I'm not knocking the trade. I just it's a bit odd to me, and it's not the way I would do things.
Single quarterback league, locking in a mid-tier guy.
Yeah,
I feel you. All right, let's get off of that. We're gonna go to Paul again.
Sure.
Paul acquires Justin Jefferson from Walker for DJ Moore.
That sounds right. Yeah.
I thought this was smart.
Well, he didn't keep him, so.
But you understand what he did, right? Paul's going to attempt to redraft Justin Jefferson, and if Walker had kept him, he couldn't do that. So he made sure that he can throw him back into the pool. He's got keeper options that he prefers. At the time he made the trade, he wasn't sure on what DJ Moore was going to be. Obviously, that relationship between him and Fields seems to be doing well. They've looked good in preseason and training camp and all of that. But at the time he made the deal, he wasn't going to keep DJ Moore. He had these other cheaper options in Pacheco and Watson that he was going to keep. But especially having super cheap keepers, Paul's got a higher budget than the rest. He's looking at the number 1 overall pick in snake drafts, Justin Jefferson, and seeing him on Walker's team at $61, thinking, well, he could go for 70 in our league, and I'd really like to get him. Walker might keep him. I don't want that to happen. I see what he did. I like it, Paul.
I mean, I had him on my board prior to keepers being announced, keeping Justin Jefferson there instead of Deshaun Watson, because to me, it made sense to lock in. Like, if that's what you want to do, lock that guy in and then spend an extra few dollars on Deshaun Watson rather than spend maybe a potential extra $9 on Justin Jefferson. But that's just me. So
maybe Paul's wishing that I didn't say 70 and I said 60.
Right. I mean, he went for 61 the previous year. So, can you really expect him to go for 60
less than that, or even the same
right now?
Yeah,
probably not. So
it really depends upon budgets going into this, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Right. So I'm just thinking is that, I had him on my board being kept. I was a little surprised that he wasn't, because I felt like it was a good. It's not a terrible price. It's probably at cost, which is fine for Paul's team because he has so much money. I'd rather do that than keep Watson for the extra few. But again, he's got all the money in the world. He can buy himself out of that if he needed to.
And then you got DJ Moore kept for $24. And Walker was low end on the budget. So there was Walker locking in what he's hoping is a wide receiver 1 type situation for the Bears and seeing what happens here. So let's get off of that. The duo gives Jeremy $9 for a keeper spot. So $9 is that $8 to $9 range. There was a Colin gets a keeper spot. So duo gives Jeremy $9 for a keeper spot. And then Colin gets a keeper spot. And Jeremy got $8 draft dollars later. So Jeremy sold off a couple of keeper spots for $8 and $9.
Yep. I mean, good for Jeremy putting $17 back in his pocket. I think there were probably keeper options out there that you could have explored, but getting that kind of cash is pretty significant. So I know Colin wanted the extra keeper spot so he could keep Devonta Smith, which I think he's accounting for what he paid for the keeper spot at like $18. So a bit of value there. The duo paid $9 to keep Jalen Hurts at $10, which is pretty much at cost. Not knocking that, but it is at cost, which is a bummer.
You could take that $9 and put it on Garrett Wilson at $3.
Well, yeah, but they would have kept Garrett Wilson with just 1 keeper spot. So,
right.
I mean, you can think about it that way to make yourself feel better, but at the end of the day, they started at just Garrett Wilson, and now they're at $19 sunk for adding Hurts to it.
And Andy, maybe you have the information on this, but historically, I feel like there's been top 2 quarterbacks, and whoever is the third ends up dropping in price a little bit into like that 10, 11 range. Mahomes for me is probably close to 1. Allen is up there. They have been for a couple years now. So do we end up having 3 guys in that $15 to $20 range this year? Like, is that something that normally happens? I don't feel like it is.
I don't know.
The last 2
I only
years
played 15 for Mahomes last year, and he was definitely a top 2 guy.
All right, so hold on. So 2 years ago, Mahomes went for 20, and
I think I kept him for 22 years ago.
What's that?
I think I kept him for 22 years ago. I think I paid 20 for him in 2019 or whatever it was.
So the top 2 were 20 and 15, and then it drops to $11 after that.
Yeah, so that's kind of my point is that
in 2021.
Yes,
but is Hurts a clear number 3 in that group? I think they're all pretty even in my eyes this year.
And so do we? My point is, do we see a third quarterback hit that number this year that you're predicting?
But even then, the second quarterback is in that $15 range, not the $19 range.
Right, but my point is that we have 3 now: Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. Does Hurts, get up to that tier, or does he go for 12 or 13? And now that value all of a sudden isn't as high as what I agree with Andy. I think his value should be up there, but
yeah,
we don't.
I mean,
we don't normally
I'm not
have 3
saying
quarterbacks that
Hurts
go that
is a
high.
clear number 3 there. I think you could say that Josh Allen is a number 3 there. I think you could say I've got concerns with Patrick Mahomes' offensive line losing Juju. Like, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that Hurts is the number 1 quarterback. I think they're all very, very close, but
Sure.
I'm not putting him at number 3 and saying he would be the one that falls to that $12 range just because he's number 3. I think they're all going to go for a similar price if they were all thrown back.
Right. And I guess my point is that we don't normally have 3 guys going 15 to 20. Somebody's going to be the odd man out. To put your chips in on Hurts is interesting to me for the $9 keeper value. That's all I'm saying. Like, we normally don't have a third guy up there. And you could argue that there's maybe 3 guys up, or should be up, and 1 falls. So
all right. For your sins, Damian Pierce to Andy for $7 draft dollars. Damian Pierce is a $15 keeper for Andy, essentially pushing this pushing Damian Pierce up to what, $22 keeper. Damian Pierce should be the clear number one, should get a large bulk of the work. $22. My guess it's like Montgomery the last couple of years when he was a clear number one, and Chicago was going for somewhere in the early 30s. I think even Swift early on was going for somewhere in the mid 30s. So Pierce at 22, I think that he probably would have been at that $30 to $40 range, somewhere in that mid-tier running back. So Andy keeping Pierce at essentially $22. Put some money back in his pocket. Hopefully Damian Pierce, for Andy's sake, is a solid running back, doesn't get much taken away from him. So we'll kind of see what happens. Boyer had one keeper spot as it was. So Boyer could move him for some draft dollars. Boyer's always on the low end of draft dollars lately, so it made sense for both of you because Boyer needed the money and Andy got to keep him. So
Yep, I'm happy with it. I have him on my board at $33-ish at this point,
right.
and I would have gladly paid that in the draft. So I think that he's going to do very well this season. I like the Texans.
Yeah. This is one of those times where me and Andy actually agreed on the value fairly quickly, if I remember right, and said, let's just split it and go. And it just kind of worked out.
Look at you guys.
Flip side of this is that Boyer turned around and added Miles Sanders for 5 this year and 1 next year. So almost identical value, identical keeper price at $15 for Miles Sanders. I was talking to Walker about Sanders, and we were talking somewhere in the $5 range, and I made the choice to go for Pierce for the extra couple bucks because I prefer him. So we'll see if I'm right there or not, because I could have gone either way. It's interesting that Boyer made that pivot. So one of us will be right.
Yeah, so that's going to that trade. You had mentioned is that you were going after Sanders, and I like Sanders a lot this year. I've got him valued more closer to 40. I think I've got him at 41. I did not talk to Walker. So this was a risk. I did not talk to Walker before we made our Pierce trade. I just decided, because I had Josh Allen at 20, which would have seemed high, but at least I had somebody to keep. Like, I had a couple options. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to get the cash value and see what I can do afterwards, knowing that Walker was, open to moving Sanders. And I think with what we saw from Sanders last year, hopefully having what I'm hoping is a McCaffrey style role, probably not quite as heavy, but a McCaffrey style role, I'm hoping that he can stay healthy enough to not break down during that. But I love how Pierce runs as hard as he does. So it was a hard decision to make, but I was trying to go big or go home, and we'll see who hits the home run, or if we both strike out. That's very possible.
Or both do well.
All right, let's get off YouTube
Yeah.
talking how cute your team is and stuff. Let's move on to another trade. Fryer sent Rachaad White to Charlie for Ramondre Stevenson. I like Rachaad White, but I don't like him over Stevenson.
Yeah, Stevenson's a $17 keeper. Rachaad
Yes.
White was $1.
Yes.
The Stevenson is being drafted, in the top 12 right now. So I feel like that's a massive value versus what White's potentially is. I mean, White has potential to outproduce Stevenson. Like, you can't say that there's not a possibility, but there's a reason why Stevenson's going in the top 12, right? So
yeah,
Charlie
must be worried about the Zeke signing more than most.
Which, I mean, is understandable, is that whenever Stevenson did have Harris behind him and healthy, he did suffer. So you can't blame him. But this is not a trade I would have necessarily made straight up.
I like White, but I don't know that they're going to give him the bulk of the work. I mean, they'll give him at least the majority, but is he going to be an every down back? Are they going to find somebody to take over? Is Sean Tucker going to be a guy that takes over some of the work? Are they going to bring in a vet if they start doing well? I don't know. Are they just going to throw the ball to Evans and Godwin's 20 times a game each and hope that they can carry them? I don't know. I don't know that Rachaad White is the answer, and I have him in other fantasy leagues, and I want him to be the answer there. I'm just not sure he is. Ramondre Stevenson is going to be the clear one back. Maybe Zeke steals a little bit of goal line carries, but Stevenson is a goal line back. So Stevenson did say that it was a lot of work being a full-time back last year or whatever. But Zeke isn't going to cut into his work that much that he's going to drop. Stevenson, I would put up there above Pierce and Sanders for me, which would put him up in that probably $40 to $45 range. So at $17, I'm not mad about that keeper at all. Rachaad White is, we were saying Monty was going for low 30s. White's not hitting that this year. So White's hitting 15.
Yeah, I would think probably 20 is about as high as he would go.
Right. So yes, there's value on both of these players. But all in all, if value evens out, right? Stevenson's maybe low $20, White's low 15. I'm taking a guy that I think is going to produce better, and it's Stevenson.
Yeah, I had Stevenson at 47 and White at 15. So the value is definitely a Stevenson for me.
Agreed.
So, all right, on that, that was the last trade. So let's, before we jump into teams and what we like and dislike, let's hit my personal favorite segment a little. Pow!
Wow.
What's drinking?
And that was dramatic. That was very dramatic.
I tried my
Build-up.
best.
You've been practicing that? Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to see if I froze enough that I could make it
Pent
work.
up from all the time away.
So, Boyer, what are you drinking up there, man?
Started with a hazy beer hug from Goose Islands.
That's
And
fair.
then I
Andy, what are you?
And I switched over to Bud Light, but no controversies on that. All right, just
Andy, you got your water, or are you actually drinking with us tonight?
This is a ranch water, which is tequila, lime, and Topo Chico.
Oh, you said ranch water. I thought something different.
It's pretty refreshing.
All right. On that note, I'm drinking a little Lord High Fixer. It's a hazy IPA from Three Floyds. So it's a solid hazy IPA. It's actually one of my favorite Three Floyds beer. So
they've got a pretty good variety pack. I actually had it just a couple weeks ago. It's good stuff.
That's what I'm drinking out right now. I mean, they sent me all this beer because
they need to send you internet.
On the internet jokes, let's move on. I can't deal with those. My internet might actually just shut down. Don't make fun of it.
Right. It's self-aware.
Self-aware, man. I like that. All right. So we're going to jump into the teams, their keepers, the values, that sort of stuff. Kind of give an outlook on them. So we kind of talked a little bit about Andy's. Andy started his budget at 185 this year, kept Dameon Pierce at 15, Dallas Goedert at 5, dropping him to 165 to start. Andy is on the low end, has a solid tight end, has a solid running back. Andy is always a solid drafter. He's got his notes all over the place, ready to go. I'm willing to draft everybody at a certain price, and once I hit that, I'll screw with somebody, and then hope I don't get stuck with them.
I'm still upset I outbid him for Eddie Lacy 5 years ago or whatever it was. That was
It was
just
way more than 5 years ago, buddy.
whatever. 7 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was. It was brutal, and we both went way too high. That was just rough.
But anyway, Andy's a good drafter. He knows his values. He knows what he wants, and he goes and gets it. So Andy will be fine even with a lower budget. But I'm sure he'd like to be in a slightly better situation going into the draft. But all in all, having a good running back, good tight end is not a bad start for Andy. Boyer, anything on Andy's team?
No, it's a good start. I think the one thing when you have a budget, and I've been in this position a lot, when you have a lower budget, having lower like cost keepers, not necessarily have to be the highest value, but having lower cost keepers just to eat up some roster spots can be super helpful. And I think Andy did a good job of that with Goddard at 5 and Pierce at 15. So that helps eat up those roster spots. It doesn't cost a lot. It gives them a lot more flexibility than, if there was value higher up, say he keeps the guy at 40 who's normally 60, well, then there's going to be less flexibility there. So I actually think that's pretty important. He did a good job of this. And granted, I sold him Dameon Pierce. I still love Dameon Pierce. So I think that it's a good starting spot for him, despite the low value he started with as far as budget.
Andy, how you feeling? How you feeling?
I mean, I'd like to have another $20 in my pocket going into the draft, but I feel good with what I've got. I've got a plan, a backup plan, and a really good spreadsheet. So that's never done me wrong before.
That's fair. All right, let's move on to Boyer.
Hold on. Speaking of which, Andy, what's your lowest finish in the last ever?
I finished 9th once. Aside from that, I think 6th is the lowest I've ever finished in the 13 years.
That spreadsheet is magical.
All right. Moving on to
that might have been the Bilal Powell year.
Oh yeah, MVP Bilal Powell.
Yeah, MVP.
he was a disappointment.
Luckily, it wasn't your Eddie Lacy year. It was Boyer's Eddie Lacy year. But Boyer always starts low. Boyer buys every year, sells out for the future to try to make playoff pushes. Boyer's starting budget was 182 this year. Keeping Miles Sanders at 15 leaves him with 167 with one spot covered. Personally, I am probably less high on Sanders than Boyer is. And Boyer has a low budget. So I'm not super stoked about your situation going into the draft, and I'm sure you aren't either. But you know what? Somehow, some way, you find a way to claw your way with low points for to a decent record and still put up a playoff push.
Okay, to be fair, last year I had decent points for. Just everyone got injured at the same time. Like all my running backs died, and I still managed to look halfway decent.
Okay, so 1 year out of 13, my bad.
There's probably another year in there that I did okay. So 2 out of 13. All right. let's get our numbers right.
But Boyer does draft low every year, it seems. I don't know the last time you were drafting above budget, so
yeah, he knows what to do where he's at. I think, not that this is the conversation we're having right now, but since it's Boyer, it's worth mentioning that he's already at 189 for next year's money. So in terms of being able to make those moves that he makes, he's already in a hole a little bit there. But I mean, Boyer's dealt with less money than this before. So Sanders is, depending on your opinion, a good to great keeper at $15. So, he knows what to do with where he's at. This is where he's at in every draft, and he tends to make it happen. So
yeah, no, I agree. Sanders at 15 is good. It's a great start. I'm just not quite as high as I think Boyer was talking him up earlier. So, but the value is definitely there. So he's got good value there. Boyer, what's your thoughts going into this?
Yeah, to be fair, I'm used to I don't know what you guys are talking about. I have a ton of money this year. I have $12 more than I'm used to working with. Like y'all are in trouble. I don't feel great not having that second keeper spot. The bummer is that I had traded that keeper spot essentially to get Cooper Kupp, who immediately lost his leg like the following week. It was super rough. Still made playoffs, and that was great. So like whatever I was doing last year was working well. So hopefully I can draft as well as I did last year. I also had some luck. I had some rookies and some guys hit that kind of just worked out and gave me some depth and some options. So, there was, I don't want to say there was all that much luck, but there was some luck as far as guys hitting and doing well. So, I got to kind of hope for the same. I've got to hope that Miles Sanders actually does what I hope he can do, which isn't by any means top 5. It's just hit that $40 value. If he can hit $40 value and I draft okay, then I'll have some options going forward. Lesser options because I have $189 next year, but options.
All right. So let's jump over to Fryer after that. Fryer starts with $197, keeping Lamar Jackson at 7. We kind of covered that quarterback type situation on values earlier, and then he keeps Ramondre Stevenson. We talked about his value as well. Leaving him with $173 to draft. I think honestly Lamar Jackson goes for that $7 to $10 range at the most anyway. So I'm kind of with you guys on the same talk we had with Watson earlier. Like, I don't know that I'm locking in Jackson. I don't know exactly what Fryer's keeper situation looked like. Maybe he thinks Jackson can be the MVP candidate again this year, be the top quarterback. But even then, I don't know that I'm locking in Jackson at $7 right here. Stevenson is a great keeper at 17. Fryer is used to drafting with a little bit of extra money, I think. And Fryer tends to go kind of off the seat of his pants. He will just start bidding for anybody at any given time. He loves to put Colin Kelly in a bidding war.
I will say is that he's one of the low tier bidders. Once they realize that we get to one of like the bottom guys in a tier, he'll start to bid that guy up, which is where everyone seems to get into trouble. Like he's not the only one, but it definitely seems to hurt him in the draft.
Yeah, I'm fine with Lamar for 7. I've got him solidly in a tier above Deshaun Watson. Granted, he's paying more for him, but I mean, if that's your guy, go get your guy. I've seen him ranked as high as 4th. So I feel better about that one than I do with committing to a bottom half quarterback like Watson, and even with the upside.
Yeah, but even at quarterback 4, you're looking at a $3 value, maybe $4 value. So, I mean, I guess that's fine, but I don't know what his other options were, so I didn't look into Fryer's options real close. So it could have been his best option, and that's why he took him. I'm not sure. So
I had him listed as keeping Lamar. I don't think he had a ton of options.
So
Ramondre more than makes up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
and to my point with Deshaun Watson earlier, Lamar's done it before. At one point, what that MVP year, he was both a quarterback 1 and a running back 2 or something like that. So that $7, that ceiling is fine, I feel like.
Yeah. It was more or less just the value there that I felt he could have spent the extra $3 and kept somebody else for more value. But I also don't know, like I said, I don't know what his keeper situation looks like. So let's move on to Robbie. Robbie's sitting at $199 to start. Robbie is keeping Saquon Barkley at 58 and TJ Hawkinson at 10. Leaving him with a $131 budget remaining going into the draft. He is the low end on budget, right next to Walker at 134 and I believe Colin at 139. So Robbie is our low end. He's got Saquon and TJ Hawkinson. Saquon at 58 probably goes somewhere in the low to mid 60s. I don't think CMC went for 70 and Eckler went for 75. Both to me last year, I blew my load on both running backs. I don't think Barkley is going to go for 70, 75. I think he'd probably end up in that 65 range. He got some value on Barkley. Got a running back 1 locked in, so he doesn't have to worry about bidding on that. And I know that some people are worried about just making sure they get that running back 1. So he does secure Saquon there. Hawkinson should be a top 3, 4 tight end this year. So at $10, it's fine. tight ends, you get the top so many. I think Kittle went for mid-20s last year, upper 20s. So there could be a lot of value there if he's one of those guys that would have shot up into the low to mid-20s. So he's got some value on both of those players. It's really just going to be what he can do with the low end budget going into the draft.
I think I like Hawkinson and Saquon both as keepers. I've got Saquon at RB4, I think, on my board, so he would have been easily mid-60s depending on when he gets nominated, but I don't see him going much lower than that if he threw him back. And Robbie's had Saquon, I think, all but 1 year in his existence in our league, so not surprised that he was happy to keep him at a value. And then Hawkinson for $10 with how good he looked after the trade to Minnesota mid-season last year. Also, don't blame him at all. I will knock Robbie for not shopping Joe Burrow. I already mentioned it once, but Joe Burrow for $2, far better quarterback keeper than either Lamar or Watson, given the price and the tiering and whatever. So I think it would have been very easy for Robbie to add a couple of bucks, even if it was only 2 or 3, and ship Burrow out. So unless Robbie really is intent on redrafting Burrow, I don't see why he wouldn't do that just to get some money back in his pocket, and missed opportunity there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, and people might be concerned. People might be concerned about the injury too, so maybe it was harder to shop him, but I think you could have got a couple bucks out of him. Boyer, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I agree with everything Andy said. I don't really have a whole lot to add.
All right. So let's jump over to Chris. Chris starts with 196. Jamal Williams for $1 at running back, and George Pickens for $4 at wide receiver. He was not supposed to keep George Pickens. That wasn't a thing.
He was clearly going to keep George Pickens.
I know. I did send him a message asking about Pickens, asking about a keeper spot, trying to figure out how I could make this work, and it just nothing happened. So here we are. I get to watch George Pickens go off on somebody else's team. It's fine. But he starts at 196, keeps Jamal Williams for $1, Pickens for $4, leaves him with 191. So he's got a couple fill-in guy. I mean, George Pickens, I love. Jamal Williams is kind of a fill-in type guy. I think, the first couple weeks he'll be good. After that, when Kamara comes back, he'll probably vulture the goal line. But do you trust that week in and week out? I don't know. But for $1, it's worth a shot. Andy, do you have the other keeper's situation pulled up? Did he have anybody else worthwhile?
I don't. No, nobody really jumps out at me. I mean, Jamal Williams for $1 is fine, especially with Kamara being suspended for the first 3 games of the season. I think that's pretty good value, and he's definitely going to be a usable player. But over the course of the season, he's probably bench filler, bye week type of guy. So not my favorite thing to see being kept, but for $1, who cares? Like, it's good value. And then, like you said, I like Pickens this year. I'd have bid you up on him, not trying to be a jerk, but actually trying to get him if he was back in the draft. So, I like him a lot at $4. So it's a good spot to be, even if one of your guys is considered a flex at best. For $1, that's totally fine.
Yeah. Well, and I reached out to Chris. I reached out to Robbie both about keeper spots, because we'll talk about my situation later. But I was trying to find those teams. I'm like, hey, maybe I can grab a keeper spot off these guys. So didn't happen.
So on my board, I have him keeping Pickens and selling his second keeper spot because I didn't like the rest of what he had. I'm a little shocked that he didn't. And Jamal Williams, I think, is honestly, he's the most fun personality right now in the NFL. I love that guy. But they've also got Kendra Miller, right? They drafted. So I don't think that he's going to be the bell cow for 4 weeks to give him a ton of value here. I think he'll get some touchdowns and things like that, but that's how Detroit used him. And that's because they kind of had to. They've got Kendra Miller, who's a similar type, but younger back. So I don't like this keeper at all. I think Jamal Williams could have been had for $1, $2, $3 in the draft. So I think he should have sold it for even $6 at a discount. I think would have been a better move.
I think Jamal, because of the suspension, would have gone for somewhere in the $6 to $7 range, maybe, because somebody would have said it's worthwhile. But even for $6 or $7, I'm with you. That's
Right.
why I reached out
Like
to him on selling that spot.
I wouldn't have touched him for 6 or 7. If he went for 3 or 4, that's when I would have been interested. And because of Kendre Miller, like if they didn't draft somebody who's a good back who profiles very similarly, then I see it. But they did. They added another back, and so even with and it makes sense for them as a team. If you're not going to have Kamara, you want to make sure you have another back who can do it. Jamal Williams also wasn't terribly efficient in Detroit. He was great as a goal line back. He got it in the end zone, but he didn't get a ton of carries outside of that, and there was a reason for it. So, when Swift did go down, his efficiency just wasn't there. So I'm not a huge fan of this pick. I could be proven wrong again. I hope I am, because this guy, I love this guy. I would love to watch him talk and interact with fans and stuff like that. So you have to root for him, but for fantasy purposes, I don't like it.
I don't have a lot of time. While they're droning on about what they're drinking, I've been digging deep so I can bring you the info they don't want you to know. Sure, you could just keep listening to Andy attempt to influence how you draft this weekend, but here's what you really need to know. Some of you are in a better position than others headed into this weekend, and you ought to know how the pre-draft power rankings look. Charlie's at the top. He's got the best keeper values. Paul's right after him, good budget, 8 keepers. Jeremy's got the biggest budget. He's in third. Colin's got the second best keeper values, good for fourth. Bit of a drop here to duo at number 5. Top 3 keeper value pulls up their sub 200 budget. Robbie at 6, average in every way. Tyler's got the worst keeper value, dragging down his budget. Fryer's got decent keepers, average budget. Chris slightly below average cash and keepers. Andy's got a low budget, but he's average keepers, helping him avoid the seller. Walker, expensive keepers, but it's enough to help his low budget. Boyer's bringing up the rear, lowest budget, and a mediocre keeper's not doing much for him. I gotta get out of here.
All right, Andy or Boyer want to jump in on Colin? I'll let you guys take the lead on this one.
Real quick before we do that, and maybe you guys talked about it and I missed it. I think we're going back to Robbie. I have him having Kenneth Walker for 7. That we might have missed. Am I blind on that?
Is 7 all he went for last year? I know he had him,
and I feel like Hawk and Saquon. I feel like Kenneth Walker was the obvious option there.
Yeah,
for 7.
Yes, Kenneth Walker went for 7 last year. You're correct.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There have been times in this league where guys have kept a stud at a worse value just to have the stud.
To me, Hawk would
I don't get it. I'd rather have the money in my pocket, but maybe he's worried about Charbonnet. Maybe he's worried about. Is there an injury issue with Kenneth Walker right now?
He was out for a couple weeks early in the off season, but he's back.
Like a hamstring or something.
Yeah, I guess if you have concerns, but at the end of the day, at the very least, another massive missed opportunity to sell him to somebody else who's interested.
Yes. And to be honest, I would have been interested. I didn't even approach him. I thought he was a lock as a keeper at 7, honestly. So we didn't really mention that while we were talking about Robbie. So I wanted to bring it back to Kenneth Walker there, because I feel like that is probably over Hawk. Hawk, I think, probably goes for that 12 to 13 range anyway with how tight ends go. I don't think he goes.
I'd put Hawk in the upper teens, 20-ish, because George Kittle,
right. So
Kittle, Waller, Kelsey, all of them are going into the 20s.
Right, but we're talking about a few bucks here, Ty. I'm talking Kenneth Walker could be a $20 value. So that's where I'm that's where I'm at. Like
George Kittle went for 29 last year. So I mean, if Hawkinson gets to that price, that's $20 value.
that's fair. I don't think he's going to get there, but I still think Kenneth Walker.
Well, he's not because he's going to be capped at $10.
That's fair. That's
I
fair.
mean, Saquon for sure is not a $20 value. Nobody's going 78 on Saquon this year.
Right. But in my opinion, you keep
But Robbie
Saquon
loves him.
Walker, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch, and you can go get a tight end with whatever value you saved. So for me,
Yeah.
the tight ends has never been a a position I highly value. I usually get the $1 ones at the end, but I just want to bring it back to that. But yeah, we can move on to Kelly now if you want to.
All right, go ahead. Andy, go ahead and take that because Boyer talks too much.
Colin's got a lot of good keepers. He's got Josh Jacobs for 39, Devonta Smith for 10, Chris Olave for 13. So good couple of wide receivers, and then last year's top rusher. So not a bad spot to be. He's coming in at 209, but he's also spending the second most on his keepers after Robbie. So he's only going to have 147 in pocket, but having 3 studs to build around, especially now that Jacobs got his contract sorted out. Even if you got to deal with a slow start from Jacobs being out of camp all summer, I think Colin's in a really good spot.
Yeah, I think the value's there on all 3 of the guys. Keeping 3 of them for the prices they're at, getting decent value out of it. You've locked up 3 starting roles, 139. I mean, we talked about the quarterbacks. You grab one of the top 7 or 8 quarterbacks for $7-8 at the most, and then you're sitting with a tight end that you can get fairly cheap later. Because Boy was just talking about it, tight ends don't go that heavy. You spend up on that second running back, and then you deal. Colin's good at dealing with all those cheap guys on the bench and grabbing some decent players. So I like Colin's situation, even though he is at 139 going into the draft.
Suddenly tight ends don't go for that much money. No, I'm just kidding. Derek Carr
Outside of the top 3 or 4.
I'm just kidding, man.
Shut up. Shut up.
You guys are cute.
Sometimes Derek Carr has been known to hyper focus on a player. Waller for a couple years. Devontae Adams had a monster year last year. Even going back to Michael Crabtree, who wasn't anything, super special until I mean, he was good with the 49ers. He had a great Raiders year. So I think Olave is probably going to be the biggest value here. He has a biggest chance to just make this massive jump and be like just out of this world. But you can't be upset with any of these keepers. This is a great keeper group for having 3 of them, especially. And it eats those positions up. So whatever value, whatever money he's got left, he doesn't have a ton of positions left to fill. So as far as starters go, so I think Colin Kelly did an excellent job, especially getting that 3rd keeper spot. I think was really important for him.
All right, jump us over into Paul Boyer.
Yeah. Paul is got $213 with Khalil Herbert, Deshaun Watson, and Isaiah Pacheco. Herbert was kept at 5, Watson 1, Pacheco 2. Ty, why don't you give us your thoughts on where Paul's at?
My thoughts are Paul's at $205 going into the draft. He's got 3 keepers.
My apologies.
Well, he started with 213, but he's got 3 keepers, which drops him to 205. It's a math thing.
Yeah, my sheet doesn't do that for me, so
just the draft sheet that I'm staring at does all of it for me.
Yeah, I didn't really care about other people's teams. I care about mine and my sheet, but I got you. Keep going.
Okay, for the podcast purposes, you should care about other people's shit. All right, so Paul's starting this draft after keepers with 205. We already gave our take on Watson. Pacheco's gonna be the number 1 in Kansas City. I think he ends up splitting some work. He's got good value. Khalil Herbert is really, I think, Paul's best keeper at this point. Although there's mixed reports. I mean, they've got a couple solid backs there with him, Darrington Evans and who the hell did they draft this year?
Roshan Johnson, Donta Foreman,
I
they
think you
picked
meant
up in free
Devontae
agency.
Deontay Foreman and Roshan, yeah. But Khalil Herbert's going to be the clear number one there. But I wouldn't be shocked if the other ones don't start cutting into his work a little bit. But Herbert is his best value here. I love that keeper spot. Pacheco's solid, and we already talked about Watson. So grabbing wide receivers are normally cheaper than getting the big running backs. So locking in 2 running backs, even if Pacheco's a flex and he can get another running back. Wide receivers tend to go cheaper, so leaving those spots open is a smart move for what he has.
Nothing to add here.
Nothing to add on Boyer either. He's off in La La Land over there.
Okay, so I was just looking. Herbert is 5'9", 212, which, I mean, he's built pretty solidly, but he's not quite built like Montgomery as like a primary back. I think there's a reason why they added Foreman and Roshan Johnson. So
There was a lot of murmurings that Foreman could have got cut.
yeah,
He didn't. So that means something, but like his name was out there.
I think that means that the Bears are expecting to be a little bit more of a running back by committee than they were, say, last year when they had a clear cut running back one like Montgomery. I also think is that there's a chance that they just go into the wing T in every single game with all these running backs and Justin Fields, who will be the leading rusher potentially.
Is the wing T like the flying V? Is that how that works?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, Bombay. But I think Pacheco is actually the best value, not by a ton, but we know what Pacheco is going to be. He's going to be the main, like, between the tackles guy, I think, for the most part for the Chiefs. And when he played last year in that role, he was excellent. He was a top 16 back when he did it. Not sure he's going to finish quite there because that's a big workload to deal with, and they don't do a lot of between the tackle runs. But I'm worried about Khalil Herbert this year. I think that there's a lot of, I guess, there's 2 running backs behind him that could easily take the job or be close to it, and Justin Fields also has the potential to beat Lamar's record of rushing yards by a quarterback. So I would be worried about Herbert a little bit. At $5, I'd keep him, but I don't think he's the best value, as Ty said, personally.
You say you know what Pacheco is. Nobody knows what anybody in that Chiefs offense is other than Kelsey and Mahomes.
They kept the exact same running back group. It's the exact same. What's to say they're not going to do the exact same thing they did at the back half of last year? There's no reason.
Ty likes Pacheco. Ty likes Herbert. Boyer likes Pacheco. I like Watson the best. Let's move on.
All right, Paul, don't fuck up the draft. All right. Andy, take me into my team.
All right. Ty is keeping Jahan Dotson for $3. I think this looks great with Terry having turf toe, and I think there was a chance he was going to be number one guy. He seems to have a great rapport with Sam Howell, which is great. And then Ty's also got $210, so $207 after keeping Dotson. It's a pretty decent spot to be. A lot of flexibility in the draft. I don't think you're head and shoulders above anybody else right now. You're just right in the middle. Ty's team usually tends to be heavy on money because his team sucked the year before, but this time you won, so.
And I still have money. That was from 2 years ago. I sold out so hard that I had money this year.
Yep. So where we got?
Yeah, I like the Ty. You had a bunch of options, so I want to applaud you for that. I think Christian Watson for $1, Brandon Ayuk for $3 could have been solid. Mahomes at 15. I appreciate you shopping him. That's something that we said yet others have missed opportunities. Maybe they did shop him. We don't know for sure, but we didn't. None of us saw the shopping going on. So, but I like where Dotson is at. He's a touchdown machine. And in this league, like in fantasy in general, touchdowns can just absolutely make or break a player. I'm perfectly fine with you keeping Dotson. I think this is a good pick.
I was between him and Watson, just taking a stab on the $3 or $1 young wide receiver. That Green Bay offense is looking real good all of a sudden in preseason, but who knows?
Preseason.
Yeah, right.
Says the Bears fan.
But no, I tried to shop Mahomes. I tried to shop Kelsey. I tried to shop my opposite wide receiver. If anybody would have bought one of them, I would have got stuck with the other. But I wasn't sure buying a keeper spot for $8 or $9 and keeping Watson at $9 or $10 was worth it. So I just said, let's ride it and go for it. Also, buying a keeper spot at $8 to keep Mahomes at 22 or 23 also didn't seem logical. So if I could have gotten one at a discount from, Robbie or Chris or somebody that I thought was a possibility of selling, Jeremy was selling a keeper spot. If I could have gotten one for a little bit cheaper, I would have gone for it. But at $8 or $9, it just wasn't quite worth it to me.
Yeah, 5 or 6, I think, was your magic number on that.
And I knew that it probably wasn't going to happen. So it is.
Every so often it does. I mean, Fryer's been known to sell that too. And especially when we get close to keeper spots, like having to announce it and players are like, oh shit, I don't actually have a second person. I need to get some value out of this. So it was possible, but I don't blame you. I think Dotson was a good pick.
All right, so we're going to jump over to Charlie. Charlie starts at 205, keeps Alexander Madison at 3, Rachaad White at 1, Calvin Ridley at 2, leaving him with 199 going into this draft with 3 keepers. Madison, great value at $3. Rachaad White, we kind of talked about him earlier, solid. I mean, still a solid value, even though I talked him down a little bit. I still think there's a $15, $20 value there. And then Calvin Ridley, who the hell knows what his value would have been in the draft this year, but everybody loves him. So he should be the number 1 wide receiver there for Lawrence. And if nothing else, it's a top 15 wide receiver possibly for $2. So Charlie's got a lot of value here and still has $199 going in. So he could realistically spend big on 2 or 3 guys and just go for it. So I like the spot that Charlie's in.
So you could also get a bench that's just like full, like he's just got, high end guys and a bunch of depth. He's got a lot of options. So yeah, I mean, Ridley's probably the only question mark technically, but he looks good in camp. So he would have gone for more than $2. That's for darn sure.
For sure. I mean, he's got so much hype around him, and I mean, we've seen it only takes 2 guys to drive the price up on somebody too. So I mean, if Charlie wants him, and if Ty, for instance, also wanted him, he could have gone for $18, $20.
Yeah, I would say 20 seems very realistic.
Yeah. So Charlie likes him. He's got him for a hell of a deal. Good work.
Yeah, awesome keepers, Charlie. That's very, very much maybe the top up there, minus Kelly.
So we don't do power rankings anymore.
So the duo at 192 to start keeps Jalen Hurts at 10, Garrett Wilson at 3. We kind of already talked about the Jalen Hurts situation. They bought the keeper spot to keep Jalen Hurts, essentially keeping him at top of market value. Garrett Wilson is a great keeper. He would have gone for somewhere in probably the $40 range. Justin Jefferson, those top wide receivers go, like we talked about, somewhere in the 50 to 60 range. So Garrett Wilson, 40 to 50 is could have easily happened. So that's a great keeper value. So spending the 19 on Hurts doesn't hurt him that bad. Yeah. But you know what? They come into the draft with 179. Love Garrett Wilson. I like Hurts. Hurts he makes me nervous. Every time he takes off running, I get nervous for that guy, but it is what it is. He's a great quarterback. Garrett Wilson is a stud wide receiver. They're in a good spot. They got 197, so they're not much lower than most of the other people coming in that started in that $200 range. They're lower than a handful of us, but they can still spend up big on 2 or 3 guys and get the guys they want.
Yep.
So,
I
well,
don't think Boyer has anything to add.
my Boyer's not here. You want to take us into Jeremy?
Sure. Jeremy has Amon-Ra St. Brown as his only keeper at $16, but he's sitting on max money at 230, which is a pretty good spot to be. I like St. Brown quite a bit. $16 isn't the cheapest keeper, but there's a lot of value there. Plus, having max money, Jeremy's in a good spot.
Yep. And selling the keeper spots got him to that max money. And I, like you said, I love Amon-Ra. I think he's going to be the clear number one target there. He's going to keep doing what he's doing. Goff loves him. Detroit loves him. He's in a good spot. So Jeremy will blow his money on two guys and screw up the draft somehow, some way, because that's what Jeremy does. But it'll be all right. Boy, you're going to talk about Walker since you're back?
Yeah. Walker kept DJ Moore at 24 and AJ Brown at 32. Someone want to do the math on the starting at 190 minus X and Y?
134 left.
134 left. So AJ Brown at 32, fantastic keeper. I mean, I think he's probably top 6, 7 easy. I mean, if not top 5. DJ Moore, I think, is interesting at 24 because I think that's a bit of a Bears fan type pick. Like you're expecting a lot. He's been very consistent, but I don't feel like his value has really gone past 24 the last so many years when he's gotten 1,000 yards with the garbage that's been Carolina. So there's a lot of ceiling there, but I'm not sure I would have made that move. I don't know if I would have made that keeper pick.
Andy, go ahead.
I don't have an issue with any of this. Walker's in a similar situation with Boyer most years in terms of having low money. AJ Brown, DJ Moore, I think are two top end receivers this year. So, they weren't cheap, but Walker wasn't in a great position to really, he didn't have keepers to work with. He didn't have money that he could spend to go get keepers really. So, he's got guys with value. It's a bummer that kind of hamstrings what he's able to do on the higher end guys in the draft. But I mean, $134 is $134. He can go spend 80 on McCaffrey if that's what he wants to do. He's got the money and he's got 2 stud wide receivers locked in. So, it's not like he can't do anything. It's just going to be a little bit lighter, probably in the middle area of the draft. But, he's got 2 good players to show for it. So, I don't think he stacks up with some of the high end teams that had a ton of cash and really cheap keepers, but it's not bad.
Question for both of you here. DJ Moore or DK Metcalf?
I'm probably taking DK. I think that
I think I would lean toward DK as well. But I have them very, very close. I think the Bears passing offense is going to be worse than the Seahawks, but the Seahawks have 3 guys they throw to. Bears have 1, as far as I can tell. So
that's fair. I just feel like that's where, if he's under DK, he gets a little bit of a teardrop. If he's over DK, he's right where a $24 keeper would have made sense to me, I guess. So I'm not saying he doesn't get cost there. I just don't think that he's a value there, I guess. That's my only point.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm with Andy. I think with what Walker had and what he's working with going into this, he's fine for where he's at. Definitely got value on Brown. DJ Moore, maybe there's value there because we are, mostly Chicago fans around here, most of us. So maybe, like Andy said earlier, 2 people like DJ Moore drives the price up.
I mean, he actually could have gone 30-35.
I was going to say 30.
Not to say he's going to produce at that, but he easily could have. So
I was going to say 30 to 32 was about that high range of where I expected him to go this year. So there's a little bit of value there, I think, because of the base of Chicago fans. I think he would have been driven up just a little bit. Also depends on where he goes in the draft, because if he's the end of a tier, if he's one of the last guys, and people are like, hell, I got to grab a guy. He could have gone higher. Also, if he goes late enough, which he wouldn't have, he could have gone lower because people were like, well, I don't want to spend the money right now.
Yeah, see,
So-
as a Bears fan, I'm trying to be real conservative on Bears. Like they've hurt me in the past at this point. So
Yeah. So, all right. Well, there's your guys' rundown of your teams, your keepers. Mostly neutral conversation. A couple of you guys suck. A couple of you guys have real freaking good keepers. We'll see what happens come Sunday. Plan on just whooping you all in the draft, and you know, it is what it is. The champ is here. He'll be back in the building Sunday. I will be taking my trophy over, and you know, hopefully starting this draft off the right way. Andy, I believe we're to you.
Yes, I did some looking at the last 5 years of the league to see if I could find any sort of correlation in what wins championships. And then I realized that looking at only 5 champions would not be great for trying to figure out analysis, especially with Robbie's 2021 not great team throwing things off there. So then I decided that I should look at what makes playoffs, because that's a little bit more in your control. Winning a championship, sometimes you lose to Robbie. So so looking at what makes playoffs, I pulled a bunch of stuff just to see if anything had any sort of correlation from my math days in college. Your correlation coefficient can go from -1 to 1, and it's a strong correlation depending on what you're looking at. If you get over about a half in either direction, so we don't have any strong correlations here, but I did look at a bunch of things, and I'll tell you some of the ones that were at least slightly correlated. So I looked at Yahoo projections immediately after the draft and whether or not those hit at all, and that was the second most predictive thing out of all of the variables I looked at. So I guess I'll run down the list of everything I looked at. Your Yahoo projection, your budget going into the auction, how many keepers you had, what the value on those keepers are based on my spreadsheet, the total value being your budget plus your keeper value, what percentage of your budget you spent on your quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, flex, kicker, and defense together, and your bench, how many rookies you took, and then correlated that with did you make the playoffs or not. So correlation was the strongest at a 0.25, so slight correlation, math people. The higher you spend on quarterback, the more likely you are to make playoffs, kind of, slightly, a little bit. But that's the most predictive. The more you spend on quarterback, the more likely you are to make playoffs, more so than anything else. Shortly behind that, with a 0.23, is your Yahoo projection. If you're projected to do well by Yahoo, apparently that helps. Shortly behind that is how much you spend on running backs as a percentage of your budget. Now, the interesting thing here is wide receiver spend, tight end spend, and bench spend were the next 3 strongest. We're in like the teens here, like 0.16, 0.13. Were the next 3 strongest, but they were negatively correlated with your finish. So the more you spent on wide receiver, tight end, and bench, the worse you did. So slightly, a little bit. It's not very correlated, but you know, that's what it says. So enough with the big numbers talk. I'll get into some more specifics. Maybe give some examples to help. So Yahoo projections. If you were projected to be the number 1 or number 2 team by Yahoo in the last 5 years, you had a 50% chance of making the playoffs. If you were projected to be the number 1 team, you had an 80% chance of making the playoffs. If you were projected to be the number 11 or the number 12 team by Yahoo, you had a 20% chance of making the playoffs. If you were projected to be last by Yahoo, 0% chance in those 5 years. So small sample size, but Yahoo's projections do seem to be correlated here.
Andy, real quick on that. Several teams, mine including at times, have opted to draft an extra bench player, and therefore Yahoo projections do kind of get messed up.
Fair point.
Where that
I didn't account for that.
Like that, or you just look at the projections?
No, because what I did was I went back and I looked at draft day projections, because that's the only way you can see like right after the draft, and that does like that's not fixed in that. So that's a fair point.
Something I just wanted to bring up, because I know that some, probably like 2 or 3 teams, it seems like every year drafts an extra bench player instead of that kicker or defense, and Yahoo projections have them ranked lower than what they should. So
yeah, but still even then, Yahoo's got whoever number 1 is projected in there to 80% clip. So
right, I guess my point is that 20%, could be more like 30%. Once you add a defense or whatever it is that you're missing. So
sure,
not like that's great, but just food for thought, because I know that's something that's weird in our league. Where
counterpoint to that, if you didn't draft a kicker or defense, you were probably that number 11 or 12 that only made playoffs 20% of the time. So
snap.
Sure.
All right. So your budget, 40% of the top 10 budgets in the last 5 years made playoffs, which was surprising to me. I figured that would be higher. 4 of the top 6 budgets. I don't know where Ty's going to be when this all gets flipped, but 4 of the top 6 budgets finish in the bottom 4.
That guy sucks.
Keeper count doesn't matter. Keeper value is 50% if you're to make the playoffs, if you're in the top 10 of keeper value. Total value, which is just your budget plus your keeper value. If you look at the 10 worst total values, only 1 of those guys made playoffs. If you look at the 10 best total values, only 4 of them made playoffs. Again, Ty's dragging this down. Ty has the top 3 total value seasons if I rank them from highest total value to the lowest in the last 5 years. And in those 3 years, last year he won the championship. I believe that was this one. But this one and this one, he was 10th.
At least I wasn't naked like Paul.
To be fair, I would expect Paul to be somewhere there too, because it feels like when he has the budget and the keepers, he just can't seem to win.
Listen, let's not throw Paul in there. Let me have my moment. All right, come on.
I'm sorry. I'm just like, it is definitely Paul having a bunch of cash and a great keepers. We're not even worried. With you, we're worried half the time or a third of the time.
All right, looking at the 10 highest QB spends, half of them made the playoffs, only 20% on the low side made the playoffs. 10 highest RB spends, 60% made the playoffs. 10 lowest wide receiver spends, half of them made the playoffs. And then this one is interesting, and so something that I looked at that didn't end up being as interesting as I thought it was going to be was whether or not drafting Travis Kelce made the playoffs for you, and he really doesn't, but this tells that story. Out of the 10 highest tight end spends, only 1 team made the playoffs. So going all in on Kelce might not work, but also some of the guys who have gone all in on Kelce were Jeremy in his naked year, Charlie last year, who didn't have the budget for it. Like, I think some lower end teams have seen that as, well, I can get an edge this way, which kind of throws that out a little bit. But
They miss their guys in their tiers. They're looking rough. They say, let me go pour the money into Kelsey and see if I can't make it up.
Yep. And
Kelsey,
then,
Kelsey makes the playoffs. The team
yeah,
that
because he
drafted
gets sold to a
Kelsey.
playoff team.
Right.
Yeah, that's the bulk of the interesting information there. So now you all are prepared for your draft.
Right.
Which we shouldn't be trying to do for you, but you're welcome. Anyway.
Hey,
Good
I
job,
just
Andy.
tell you the
Cool.
numbers.
No, boy, that's what we're here for. We're supposed to help people.
No,
That's the whole podcast.
Not before the draft. But
I don't know.
Andy is, because he's tired of winning the league at this point, and he's like, you know what? Let me share some of my thoughts and things.
But I forgot the champ's not in the room here. Don't worry about me.
The champ is in the room, but I'm pretty sure like the 18-time champ is also in the room, and the guy who's gotten third place 5 times is also here. So just want to throw my weight around, I guess.
What weight? You're 110 pounds. Get out of here. All right. On that, did either of you prepare a dad joke for tonight?
No.
Did not.
All right, perfect. Then we're gonna go ahead and skip dad jokes. We'll come at you with a dad joke next time. One of us will be prepared. Anything else you guys want to drop before we get out of here?
I'm looking forward to the draft and football.
I'm looking forward to Paul on Sunday.
Yeah, baby.
Oh, yes,
We
absolutely.
haven't talked about that enough.
Really need 2 more.
Yeah.
Gotta hype that up.
So, all right, Paul, looking forward to it. Everybody else, I hate you. You suck. You're the worst drafters, really. So keep that up so we can get some wins. Otherwise, we'll see you guys Sunday, and any randoms that are still here, let us know why you're still here, and we'll go from there. All right, on that, we're out. See you.